Good morning, Gamecock fans. Today is Tuesday, August 26th, the year of our Lord 2025. This is Coffee with JC Shurburtt. Certainly appreciate you guys joining me this morning and gals out there in Gamecock land and kind of a string of good news. I know this freaks some of you out, frankly, heading into the first game. Mostly good news, mostly positive reports from camp, which is rare, to have that much positivity. Uh, and then yesterday, Rashul Faison gets cleared. Darius Gray, a five-star offensive lineman, commits to the Gamecocks on Friday. The SEC schedule thing, that's up for debate as to whether or not that's good news, though. It does seem like there's a chance that Carolina doesn't end up with Georgia, Florida, Kentucky, or Georgia, Tennessee, Kentucky. It looks like what they're going to do because they realize that scheduling, the balance that they want in the conference is next to impossible because of the transfer portal. So I think what they're going to do is just say, all right, if it's a secondary rivalry, it's going on your schedule. We honor tradition here in the SEC. Now the question becomes, is Georgia's definitely a secondary rival for South Carolina. Georgia has a lot of quote unquote rivalries out there. Auburn's probably the biggest because it's the most played. And then you look at, of course, the game with Florida and Jacksonville every year. They're not going to not play that every year. And so they got one spot. Will it be Tennessee? Will it be, some random team? Will they try to say, well, we want Georgia and Bama to play every year? That used to be a rivalry game, along with Georgia Tech and Alabama. Georgia and Georgia Tech are mentioned in the Alabama fight song. Useless trivia there. But I mean, I don't know. I think it's probably likely, just based on what I heard out of Athens the other day, that it is Georgia for one of them. But who are the other two? Kentucky's a safe bet just because of math and the non-rivalry games that fit. Kentucky was definitely going to be the permanent opponent if they had gone to a stated 8 and gone to 1-7. But will the Gamecocks get Vanderbilt? Will they get Missouri? Will they get a Mississippi State that they used to play every year? That's interesting. Missouri does have a trophy, and it is, will they consider that a secondary rival? They kept both the trophy games on the schedule, A&M and Missouri, for the 8-team temporary format. That A&M trophy, I don't know that a lot of people know that there's a trophy for the game. But the Mayor's Cup is something that has kind of taken on a life of its own. Missouri has kind of a forced rivalry with Arkansas, the Red Line rivalry, I think they called it. And, those schools didn't even play all that much. Missouri and Arkansas in football before Missouri got into the SEC got into the SEC, and they said, y'all are going to play every weekend on Thanksgiving weekend. Missouri has much bigger rivalries with Kansas and Kansas State and Illinois and Oklahoma to a certain extent. I think Missouri will get Oklahoma. I think Oklahoma's looking at Texas, Mizzou, and one more, maybe A&M. Who knows? But we'll see how that unfolds. That's probably, depending on your point of view, what good news or bad news. The Nike deal, good news for the vast majority of you out there. So a string of good news. And then yesterday, Rahsul Faison is cleared. Right after the show, got the word. I was out of the house, of course. Had to kind of come back and get it always happens that way. Out last week, 3 big pieces of breaking news. Left the house to run some errands and do some other stuff yesterday, and there comes that. So yours truly is not been in a great position when all this news is broken lately. But this is big for South Carolina in a lot of ways. Number one, Jamie Bradford on the morning show yesterday was talking about the momentum. I think that one thing Shane Beamer's done at South Carolina, and it really started with Steve Spurrier, take the shape of the roster as far as talent and all that later in his tenure out of it, extremely late in his tenure, because he had pretty good teams up until 2 years before he departed. Well, there were a lot of recruiting misses. But they were also, And I think this is one of the reasons Will Muschamp was able to come in and kind of will that first team he had with a bunch of freshmen starting everywhere to a bowl game. Is because the Spurs started recruiting high character people into the program. Had some guys that he inherited and also recruited early. They're kind of knuckleheads, and Spurrier never dealt with that at Florida. Never, I mean, he doesn't tolerate it. And so they started kind of recruiting for character and all that. I think Will Muschamp brought in a lot of good citizens and a lot of good players, frankly. And then Beamer, with the emphasis on the culture and the emphasis on the togetherness and the emphasis on fit, that's the one thing that will get, if you're a good player, that will get you not unoffered from the University of South Carolina, is, character. And because you got a lot of good guys that care about each other, win or lose, that stuff really feels warm and fuzzy to everybody on the outside, uh, including myself. I include myself in that. When you're winning, when you're losing, you don't really understand it, because we out here are not part of the team. We're not in the building, and rightfully so. All of us crazy people in the building giving our opinions daily. Imagine that. It would be a bizarro world. But you know, so one of those things that we look at when the winning happens and when it doesn't, we either don't think about it, and then some people choose to lash out about that stuff. But Beamer has done a fantastic job of emphasizing that. I think that's a key to his success. I mentioned several times the transition on rosters in college football. So you not only have to put together a team almost on a yearly basis from a football standpoint. What Beamer does is emphasizes um, the character part of it and the fit part of it, and so that helps them not miss. Because we've seen around the country, if you get a group or a handful of guys that in the portal that maybe be really good, maybe they're really good players on paper, but they don't practice hard. They kind of feel like they've arrived. They got a bunch of money. And I'm not saying Carolina doesn't pay well to those that deserve it, but there's that tendency, to slack off. I mean, one could even argue Ole Miss last year. Ole Miss had such a good roster. I mean, you watched them; they had players everywhere, and they went 9-3 and lost to Kentucky and Florida. No shame in losing on a Saturday night in Baton Rouge in a close game, but the 10-3, got fortunate to get Duke without a quarterback in the Gator Bowl, but I can't say that they overperformed. That should have been a playoff team. And had they gotten the opportunity, which they probably should have gotten the opportunity, even with the early-ish loss to Kentucky at home, it'd have been a different story, I think, as far as all this Big Ten mess. But, I'm not saying they got a bad group by any means. I mean, Walter Nolan played his butt off last year. That's sometimes for a rich five-star defensive tackle with all the talent in the world. That's not always they're not always motivated. Um, but you had Juice Wells. What happened to him? I mean, they could have used some of his big playability and things like that. Florida State goes. I mentioned Florida State's the go-to with all this. I still don't know that they're out of their hole based on some things I've heard out of Tallahassee this preseason, but you know how that goes. Watch them go beat Alabama now. And I think people just straight up don't like Thomas Castellanos, and rightfully so. That guy, he kind of talks a lot about and hasn't really achieved a lot. Nobody likes anybody like that, but we'll see how it goes down there. But Beamer at South Carolina, I mean, they've had to do it lightning fast with the portal, but they've got a good group. And so I say all that, establishing the fact that they have a good culture to say the rest of the team is going to be extremely fired up that Faison is eligible. They know they've worked with him side by side, off-season workout, spring, since he got there, really. And the players had to have seen it as kind of a travesty, a negative thing about the NCAA, an anti-justice. I think they probably saw it that way because that's their teammate and he's a good player and they can help him. So they're going to be excited. So positive momentum there. They can really fire up your team and get them ready to go play. And, just talking to some people yesterday, the team's locked and loaded and ready to go. What does that mean? I don't know. I mentioned Ole Miss earlier. Shane Beamer after that game, which was one of the two pretty bad games last year. I would say Old Dominion, even in the win, was a bad one. So they had a great week of practice. And look, that's not just Shane Beamer not knowing his team, because coaches say that all the time. I had a great week of practice one week, and they lose to get their butts kicked. The next week, practice is just kind of and they go out there and play well and win. Now, sometimes you'll have a bad week of practice, and you know you're going to get your butt kicked going into the game, and you do. But it's not. It doesn't correlate 100% of the time, maybe not even 50% of the time. But the team's locked and loaded and ready to go, focused on this game. I think Virginia Tech, based on some of their player comments recently, they're ready to go hit somebody else. So they're kind of focused and ready to go. But back to Faison. Okay, so what does this mean as far as the depth chart goes? Then I think the depth chart will either be out today or tomorrow. Virginia Tech has not released one yet from what I can see. So I guess they're both kind of sandbagging a little bit because, with the delayed week, you release that puppy on a Wednesday. Because again, when coaches watch film, they're also watching players who's going to play and what are their weaknesses individually, which is smart. We don't think about that a lot. A lot of times we think about game plan. All right, so what are they going to do against cover one? That kind of thing. What play are they going to call? So, but you're also watching players because you're like, well, our guy's faster than this guy. So if we can dial something up to get him in man coverage, he's going to win, and that's a touchdown. If we execute, all kinds of things go into it, folks. So when you look at that, that's probably a little gamesmanship on both sides. But it's also, like I said, it's a delayed week. They're playing Sunday, not Saturday, so everything's backed up a day. So that's probably why we don't have it. Steve Fink, great job. Been here 20. Steve Fink was actually the SID at Carolina when I started the Big Spur. He did a lot of good things for me early on. Really nice guy. I owe him a lot. And so he'll release when Coach Beamer's ready to do it. I do expect one to be released, and I think there'll be a lot of oars on there. But will Faison be at the top of the depth chart? I don't know the answer to that question. I would assume so. I don't know if maybe the bruised minor bruised shoulder in the scrimmage that he had. He's back practicing, so I think he's fine. But is the performance, because his first scrimmage, I'll be honest with you, he didn't do much. He just kind of went out there, had a couple of carries, and then got hurt. Now he's been running the ball pretty well in practices and since the spring, and they've been wanting to get him eligible. So I think he'll start. I think he'll probably get the most carries on Saturday, even if they start like Oscar Attaway. But yeah, I mean, they've been moving forward as if he is going to start. Now he's, so that would be my projection right now, with the caveat that, if the depth chart comes out and it's an or if Oscar Attaway walks out there, because I think Oscar would be the other guy. Oscar Attaway walks out there first. Don't sweat it. We'll see what happens. Faison's going to play a whole lot. I think, and I actually believe this year's running back rotation will be a little bit deeper than last year, where it's basically Rocket Sanders and, okay, Oscar, go in there and play some plays. And then sometimes they'd sneak Jawarn Howell in there for a little bit. But this year, I can see them rolling 3 into a game, 4. It's hard to do 4. Hard to do 3, really. But Alabama did it, because I remember in the 2018 national championship game from the 2017 season, last time I was at Mercedes-Benz, by the way, Uh, they Saban infamously put in Tua in the second half, and they came back and won freshman to freshman. Devontae Smith with the touchdown to win the game in overtime. But I remember Najee Harris came in the game. He's the fourth team running back that year, true freshman, and gave Georgia some fits. So the good programs do it. Speaking of Georgia, that 2021 team that won it all, Todd Monk and whoever their running backs coach was, I think it was Dell McGee, were outstanding at rotate. They rotated four backs, which was interesting because since then Georgia hasn't had a feature back, but they had Zamir White and then some other dudes that did kind of similar stuff, but they were all a little bit different. One was a little better pass catcher, and Ty Monken ran that crazy. It was like Ben Bryant referred to it as the death trap offense. They just physically maul you, but they'd also wear you out by running you horizontally. A lot of outside runs, and they rotated those four backs, and there were no keys. They put one guy in, Zamir White's in. You don't just check down and say, well, that's a dive or that's an inside run. There's no way to tip it. That's one of the only times I've seen it done like that. That Alabama thing, Harris didn't play a whole lot. They kind of limited it. But if Marquell Blackwell, Mike Shula can find a way to rotate this many backs, it's good. One thing I will say, Mike Shula, in the NFL at least, he would run some two-back sets, not necessarily just with a lead blocker, but with like two tailback types. So will that come out a little bit if you use it or lose it, man, these days? So that could be something too, that we get more of these guys a carry. So Faison Attaway probably will be one of the two, will be the starter. Isaiah Augustov is going to play. He's going to play on special teams and most likely will get some carries. He's had too good of a preseason not to. He's been very impressive, almost more impressive than you would think. And I don't know, man, if I'm off on running backs or what. I mean, it was a position when I evaluated high school talent I was relatively good at. Well, not as good as like D-line or, sometimes, basically D-line. I picked my share of good quarterbacks too. Speaking of Hawaiian quarterbacks, Marcus Mariota was a 3-star everywhere but us. Johnny Manziel, 3-star everywhere but us, 24/7 Sports. But running back, there was that one year that we had like 5 5-stars, and they all were really good. They all were deserving of it. And that was kind of against the grain because you don't normally rank 5 running backs 5-star players. But that was the Leonard Fournette, Nick Chubb, Sony Michel, Royce Freeman, Joe Mixon year. All those guys really good players. So I guess it was okay, but I don't know. It's college football. It's the portal. It's not high school projections. So maybe I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. But, I didn't see on his Colorado film what they're seeing in practice. I saw a back that was very physical. I saw a back that if you got him even a little bit of space on 3rd and 4, he would get 5, and he'd make sure he did. Now you go back to high school, different story. So I don't know, maybe if it was just the Colorado offense, they couldn't block. They were very pass happy. It was almost like, I remember when Jerry Glanville coached the Atlanta Falcons and Houston Oilers, June Jones was his OC. It was a run and shoot offense. They called it the red gun in Atlanta. Larry Munson would call the games shotgun, red gun. Falcons down at the 35-yard line. Shotgun, red gun. Miller takes a snap, And Glanville would talk about running the ball, and it was almost like a Mike Leach type offense in the NFL. And it's still a run and shoot, still around. But they would just run it. So we just run it for pride. We're throwing it most of the time. So I don't know if Pat Shurmur, the OC out at Colorado, who actually worked with Mike Shula several times, I don't know if maybe just said, all right, we're just going to run it for pride. We're just going to let Shedeur and these awesome receivers, that's going to give us the best chance to win in the Big 12 this year. So, and they won a lot of games. So I don't know if it was that or not, but if you add explosiveness and speed and acceleration, and what I was told was if Isaiah gets to the third level, you're not going to catch him. So he's like a freight train, gets going and going and going. That's good. That's good because that's why Faison is so important because Faison's a guy once he gets to the second, third level of the defense. Now he's a lot more elusive once he gets down, the kind of a slashing type guy. Uh, he can make you miss, and it's like I give Clint a lot of credit for this. It kind of made me believe because I was kind of under the impression, well, really doesn't matter who's playing running back because if you don't get blocking, and that goes for all these guys, you're not going to create things yourself. I mean, there's very few backs that can without blocking. And I think some people have thought, or my impression was some people thought that Faison was just going to be able to get yards on his own if the blocking stunk. And I don't know about that. I just don't know. I hope so, but I don't know. Uh, and so that was where I was coming from. But Clint pointed out, well, look, he's a guy that if he gets a 15-yard run, it is blocked properly. He can take it to the house because of what he can do downfield. Maybe some of the other guys, it's like a 17, 20-yard run. Fair enough. I do think that Howell can break away. I think Oscar Attaway showed in the bowl game, even though he's hurt. He mentions that he was hurt in the bowl during media this year, and I didn't know that. Maybe explain some things about the run game that day, but he's still wide open through the Illinois defense 36-yard touchdown run. So, can he do that? I think there is a difference in second and third level elusiveness when it comes to Attaway and Faison. But that's what's important about Rahsul is, this guy is an explosive playmaker in terms of, turning long runs into touchdowns. And as Steve Spurrier would say, well, that's very helpful. It's very helpful. It is. It is. But, Faison, Attaway, Augusta, Fuller, Howell, it sounds tough to say Fuller and Howell are the fourth and fifth running backs. I'm still really high on those guys. Howell's getting a lot better. He's got some things he's got to do to be more of a complete back. But he's 6'1", 220 pounds. If he sticks, I think he'll stick with it too. He's got a chance to be really good. I don't think Jawarn Howell's the guy that just goes away and you don't hear from him. Maybe so, because like I said, maybe my running back radar is off. Maybe Howell and Fuller aren't what I think they are, and all these guys, the new portal guys, it's not just people wanting the shiny new object. Who knows? I will admit if I am wrong. I'll be happy to be wrong because that means Carolina will have some good backs this year. But, those guys will play some. And I think on special teams, too, athletically, when you're talking, and running backs play a lot of special teams. Athletically, when you're talking about Matthew Fuller and a Jawarn Howell, those guys are, special teams demons, potentially. And I don't know, special teams demon may not be a good term, but I think special teams demons are guys like David Busey, Shane Beamer when he was a long snapper at Virginia Tech. Those kind of guys are just all over the place on special teams. Special teams luxury items. How about that? Because it's luxurious to have those types of guys on your special teams. But I think if you're just looking for who I believe will get carries against Virginia Tech, Faison, Attaway, and Isaiah most likely. And if, the best thing possible would be a blowout. I'm not saying it can't happen. I'm not saying it will. I'm not going to predict it. Probably predicting right at the point spread in this game just because it's an opener and it's scary and all that good stuff. But if it is a blowout, that's the good thing about blowouts is everybody gets to play. If you get a blowout and you get to empty the bench and play some guys that don't play, and then the next week, you handle business with SC State. Having two games where everybody gets to play at the beginning of the year, that helps you going into Vanderbilt, Missouri, Kentucky, LSU. Your program, your team. A lot of people don't like FCS matchups and things like that, but the coaches and players like it because normally, if you take care of business, everybody gets to play. Now, if you can do it against a Power 4 on a neutral field, even better. So that would be good. if that happened. I'm not counting on it, but you never know. All five of them may get a significant amount of carries because I think if Carolina does get up relatively, I don't think Shane's going to run up the score on his alma mater. Although you never know. He's not really a run up the score type. Um, although, wait a minute, they've scored 50 quite a few times. If you look at, the compared to Spurrier when he was here and scoring 50, and those teams probably couldn't score 50. And, since the transfer portal happened, the FCS and group of five teams, most of them by and large have gotten worse. Just as far as personnel goes, they don't have those the two or three guys that could hang are in the portal and up to an upper level. So that may have something to do with it. But, he scored half 100 against Akron, half 100 against Wofford last year. So who knows? But this isn't Tennessee that they're playing where it's going to keep throwing and trying to score. Which against that Vols team probably was pretty smart. But we'll see what happens. So a chance for all the running backs to, if Carolina goes out and handles business and maybe Virginia Tech isn't that good, we'll see kind of how that goes. Faison reminds me a lot, the more I look at it, of former Gamecock running back Corey Boyd. Now, Corey Boyd's kind of claim to fame at Carolina was the physical nature with how he runs. I mean, we remember the collision against Virginia in 03, those of us that were around for it. Gamecocks won at home 31-7, avenged a loss. And he came through the line, collided with a linebacker. That kid had to get carried. I mean, it was a vicious, violent collision. And we know Corey was a very physical player. Where the comparison starts with Faison based on Utah State is sort of like the ability, like I said, to make people miss in the secondary. Corey was actually a very elusive back. Could make people miss, had to get a little head fake and things like that. He wasn't just a power back. What kind of makes that comparison even more valid, in my opinion, is that he's been running, from what I've heard in practice, very violent and angry. You always want a violent runner. That's good. And so, maybe that's something. Again, you don't always get the complete picture when you're watching tape from Utah State or wherever, but adding that, physical running ability in, and he's up to 220 pounds with the speed and elusiveness he has, that's a Corey Boyd. I also think they're going to throw it to him out of the backfield. We know Corey was a very good receiver out of the backfield as well. Very good hands. So that's why I like that comparison. He's a Mike Shula type of back. I think when you kind of look through the years at Shula's offenses, I think he's the type of back that can do a lot of things really well, that works. It's been mentioned he's good in pass protection. So we'll see kind of what happens there. But if you kind of look at what the recruiting looked like this year, as far as the type of back they wanted to go after, Faison kind of fits that mold. And that's a minor thing. Offensive coordinators, if you have a very talented running back, they're not going to turn them down because, that's not my type of back. That's not going to happen. But there are different styles, and Faison fits into, what I believe Mike Shula is going to want to do on offense this year. So lots of excitement about him and the Gamecock running backs this year. I think that's just icing on the cake as far as what's been on paper a fantastic offseason for this program in terms of optimizing the roster to get ready to go compete in the 2025 college football season. And that's everything from transfer portal pickups to players that are on the roster getting better because it's getting ready to go because it's their time, to stars like Lenore Sellers and Dylan Stewart making a step forward in Sellers' third year in the program, but second year as a starter, and obviously Stewart's second year in the program. It's just been very they've done what they've needed to do because 2024 ends You had two juniors go pro, and rightfully so. TJ Sanders and Nick Eamon-Warray were the first two players off the board drafted by the Gamecocks. Yeah, Knight was the third pick. If I'm wrong about that, don't put it in the comments. Just trust me. If I'm getting the order messed up, but no, I think TJ went right after Nick to the Bills, and then Demetrius Knight to the Bengals. But you know, those two guys went early. You lose Tonka, you lose TJ, you lose Boogie Huntley, you lose DeAndre Jules on the defensive line inside. Uh, you lost Kyle Kennard, and all those guys were out of eligibility. You wanted to surround Lenore Sellers with more weapons. Rocket Sanders is gone. You hit the portal to get Faison. His long journey has finally, a long journey to eligibility has ended. He's eligible. You picked up Isaiah Augustov super late. Linebackers that have come in, Murphy and Justin O, look really good. And, they've done a good job. The secondary is deep. I mean, when you got a guy like Miles Norwood who could be a starter at a lot of places, he's your fourth corner right now. So that's pretty good depth back there. And I think it's been a positive offseason roster wise. Recruiting, hit that summer lull that sometimes it does where all these guys that visit, you see a streak of them commit elsewhere. And then there's some surprises too. And then, ends up Darius Gray gets on board. Amari Thomas flips from Florida State. Good things have happened. Kamari Blair's switch notwithstanding. Now, recruiting for 2026 means nothing as far as this season goes because none of those guys are on the team. But it all creates a lot of momentum. If you're a Gamecock fan, sometimes it's uncharted waters. It doesn't happen often. And if you're predicting a face plant in Atlanta, I think that's just human nature. But like I've said for a while, at some point, if this program is going to get to where it needs to be, it has to not only replace good players with good players, but handle that kind of attention. Handle being more of the hunted, And I don't think South Carolina snuck up on anybody last year. I mean, some of their best wins were in November when word was out. I mean, that Clemson game, Clemson knew what they had to try to do to stop Lenore Sellers. Same thing with A&M. Vanderbilt. So it wasn't like they didn't handle pressure and expectations well. I mean, they got upset in the bowl. I don't know that pressure and expectations had anything to do with losing the Citrus Bowl. It's a classic upset. I totaled it up yesterday. Carolina blew like 4 scoring opportunities in that game. So a lot of people that were upset because 17 points and they want to dig into play. It's always everybody reverts to play calling. I don't know. I don't think the plays. I mean, Mike Shula didn't call the fake field goal that didn't go. Mike Shula didn't, miss a field goal. Those things happen. I thought one of the plays that in the end zone late, and Michael Smith, I think, had a drop in one of those. That's not play calling. But anyway, we should have talked about the Citrus Bowl a long time ago. I'm done with that game. But it's a new season starting Sunday, and Rahsul Faison is eligible, and it's game week. And don't forget, Inside the Gamecocks, the morning show. Preston Thorne is Jamie's featured guest on Tuesdays. Mike Morgan will be in to co-host. Speaking of Mike Morgan, we got a JC and Morgan coming up here about 8:15 live. That's our new in-season spot. 8:15 in the morning on Tuesdays. Review, preview, week 1, week 0, Kansas State, Iowa State. I'm sure we'll talk about the Hawaii kicker that's from Japan that taught himself how to kick on YouTube. But that's coming up. And if you don't catch JC and Morgan, catch the podcast version this afternoon. All of our shows, the morning show, this one, it's on Inside the Gamecocks, and then JC and Morgan's another podcast stream. later this evening. Sports Talk 6 to 8. Phil and I will be along with the show, by the way, for Terrible Tuesday. And then tomorrow, Tailgate Talks drops in the morning. Stephen Garcia, Pat DeMarco. Garcia will be on the morning show. Phil and I will be along for Wide Open Wednesday. We got names for all the days now, I think. Sports Talk again. And the late night Gamecock show will have a Virginia Tech guest from VT Scoop. So that'll be a good one. So check that out. You get the behind the enemy lines perspective from the Hokies. That's always good to talk to their insiders. They're good people. All right, folks. Check out JC and Morgan later today. Download the Chief Sports app. You know the drill. ChiefSportsNetwork.com. I am JC Shurburtt. Oh, thebigspur.com as well. Don't want to forget that one. All right. I am JC Shurburtt. Have a wonderful, wonderful, terrible Tuesday. I'm out. Holla.
JC and Mad Dog Mully.